Hello and welcome to Main Mother Matriarch. My guest today is Amy Alkon, science reporter and author of a new book titled Going Menopostal, What You and Your Doctor Need to Know About the Real Science of Menopause and Perimenopause. So we spoke about menopause, what it is, the symptoms, treatment options, and why Amy believes that most menopausal women are being terribly misserved by their doctors. We also spoke about why women are particularly likely to encounter what Amy calls suck it up medicine, why ethnic differences as well as sex differences have been neglected in medicine to the detriment of patients, and the non-pharmacological interventions that can improve the health and well-being of menopausal women. While you can, of course, listen to MMM wherever you get your podcasts, the true home of the podcast is to be found at louiseperry.substack.com. That's where you can find not only the extended version of this episode, but also the extended versions of hundreds of MMM podcasts, plus the weekly bonus episodes I record with other Substackers and the MMM chat community. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Okay, so Amy, why did you decide to write a book on menopause?
It's actually on menopause and perimenopause. And it is because of all the areas in medicine, the menopause and perimenopause medical care arena is the most patient betraying. Women are most likely to not get properly diagnosed, properly treated, and they're likely to be improperly treated, like by being given antidepressants for hot flashes, which leave you unprotected in a number of ways because that is viewing a symptom, hot flashes, as the disorder itself. This is from the work of Randy Nesse, who's the co-founder of evolutionary medicine, the viewing symptoms as disorders error. And just to give you an example, if you have a headache, and we just say, oh, you have a headache, let's treat that. Let's give you some kind of aspirin or something. The headache can be just you're stressed or, there's pollen in the air or something, or it can be the sign of a brain tumor. Now, if we mute the signal that you have a brain tumor, this is bad. You need to feel that so we can possibly treat you and save your life. And this is what's happening in this area just constantly, because the big secret of gynecology departments is that probably none of the doctors, probably none, have any experience or training in treating menopause or perimenopause. This makes it unethical. It's against medical ethics for them to treat you, but they do it anyway. It's sort of business as usual. Doctors don't want to, a new doctor, I can understand they won't want to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong. I've got to refer you to someone else. The problem being that there is no one else. And those doctors who say they have expertise, and they're doctors all across the world who are certified now by the North American Menopause Society, now the Menopause Society. They're on this list of certified providers. Well, what does that mean? So in California, if you get a ticket while driving, you have to go to what's called traffic school, sign up for traffic school, take this online test that, the double yellow line doesn't mean like weave across it wildly, it means don't cross. So they have the same thing basically. So it's like traffic school for your vagina and ovaries and the rest. and this is not the same thing as doing what I did. And the reason I'm an expert in this area, I have luxury doctors don't. I sat here for 8 years. I'm a nerd. I'm actually sort of a scientific psycho mole rat. I dig into science, dig into scientific history, look at physiology on a deep, deep, deep level, the way you don't if you're in medical school and you have the orthodoxy set forward before you and it's all shiny and new. So doctors just don't know what I know because they can't spend all day reading studies. And in fact, another big secret of our medical care is that in medical schools, doctors are not trained in how to read research or critically evaluate. So most can't, some learn on their own. Most can't do that. And then they don't have time to do it at a provider like mine, which is Kaiser Permanente, big HMO medical provider. They see patients every 20 minutes. Now there are electronic medical record keeping requirements. These take a lot of time. And I'll see doctors, they have to email you back within 48 hours. They're supposed to. And they'll be emailing me at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I can be a scientific psycho, but people have families and lives, and that's okay to want to go home to your family on time. And so this is all this horrible, confluence of terrible events and practices. And to blame, by the way, doctors are victims of this system. Doctors, and let's say for the rare sociopath, they want to help their patients. And it's medical education and institutions that are so irresponsible, because if you're in a medical institution, you know that doctors don't know how to read the science. I mean, I would imagine they should know, and that they don't read the science. They don't have time. And I document this very closely in Going Menopostal because people don't believe this and they don't want to believe it. So the medical institutions need to provide panels of experts in different areas. Like, for example, I had a corneal endothelium transplant in my eye. My doctor, she's basically sticking an X-Acto in your eye. She's an elite surgeon. I can tell from, because I assess medical care for a living, that she's great at what she does. However, she has to prescribe steroids. She, not to be, she basically knows less about steroids than the average person who reads in her waiting room. And so she overdosed me on steroids. I'm still suffering the effects. And normally I read studies before I get medical care, but I was working on the book till like 30 minutes before the car came. I had a deadline and I had to just like fall into the gurney. And I didn't read about the steroids, the medications, because she does the surgery. I didn't really think about it. And so this happens in every area. You can be terribly medically harmed and not actually know what's wrong with you, because you don't have the background in that. So this is, I hope, an answer to your question.
So should we start with the 101? What is menopause and indeed perimenopause? What is happening in the body when you go through these processes?
So menopause and perimenopause, these are the eventual decline and ceasing of our fertility. I just want to mention, because it was just reminded of this. There's this notion that women feel this horrible grief at this and everything. And this is not true. This is second to last chapter in the book. Since we have birth control, women are happy to stop, to control their fertility long before menopause. And they're happy, except for the symptoms, to go into menopause. So menopause is officially 12 months without a period. And there are symptoms that are involved, and there are some decline involved. So feminists will say, the one of the researchers whose work progesterone and perimenopause part of the book, I'll describe progesterone, but that part of the book is based on, is Geraldine Pryor. She's an endocrinologist and a fierce fighter for women's health, for perimenopause to be recognized as a unique state it is, and for progesterone to be used to treat women because it's healthy as opposed to the synthetics they give. Perimenopause, you'll start having some symptoms, and the physiological problem in perimenopause is that you can have an ovulatory cycle. So menstrual cycles where you don't ovulate. And the mechanics of that are that you have a follicle, a little egg sac, and as it matures, it should rupture, and then the egg is released. The fallopian tubes, which, by the way, are not connected to the ovaries. I learned that during my study. I had a British endocrinology textbook pasted all over my walls in my bedroom. They are like these little hands, they're sort of creepy little hands. They grab the egg and send it off to the uterus to see if it meets the little sperm and implants, and then you have a developing fetus. And so in perimenopause, the feedback system goes awry, and you can have periods that seem completely like any other period, but you don't ovulate. So the little egg stays in this little sac, very sad. And this is very bad because what happens when the egg ruptures from the sac, the litter left over, it's called the corpus luteum. It's this yellow, waxy stuff. That is what progesterone is made of. That's estrogen's partner hormone in the menstrual cycle and in general. And when the two are working together as partners, you have a state of health. There have been many distortions about estrogen because of the fraudulent and terrible, methodologically terrible initial Women's Health Initiative study that was released that caused women to throw out their estrogen prescriptions and be harmed by this. So when progesterone isn't made sufficiently or at all, when you don't have enough days, there's that also. If you're weekly ovulatory, that's when the symptoms really emerge. So sleeplessness, that was a big one for me. Sleeplessness, and your brain fog, because your brain needs to have cerebral spinal fluid wash through. This is on the research of Megan Nergard, amazing scientist, that your brain is too big in your head, especially mine, I have a huge head, during the day. And then if you have proper sleep with proper deep sleep, then your brain shrinks enough for the cerebrospinal fluid to wash through and clean out what I always picture it as like a teenage boy's back seat with the Taco Bell wrappers and everything. So neural trash. And without that, you've got that accumulation. It's like coming to your desk and having someone have, open a dumpster onto your desk. You can't think, and it's terrible. And you don't know why. And this is a big problem in perimenopause. You have many mysterious symptoms. I had terrible car sickness that arose in my 40s. I'm in Venice, California, a few miles from Santa Monica. I couldn't go to Santa Monica without throwing up on my shoes. And that's if I
Wow.
drove. People would say, oh, you should drive. Oh, you should sit in the front seat. Oh, you should take Dramamine. This makes me want to murder them. Like, oh, really? I never considered that in my 40, then 46 years,
Some women, I mean, this is just my anecdotal impression as someone who's not hit this stage of life yet. Some women seem to have much harder menopauses than others, kind of regardless of what medical interventions they have. Is that your impression as well, that the spectrum is
Oh, yeah.
quite
Yeah.
wide?
I'm one of those women where you have just terrible hot flashes and many symptoms. You have a really hard time in every area. And one of them is mental health. Now, I'm from the Midwest, from Michigan, where the cars come from. And we're sappy, we Midwesterners. We're nice people and decent and everything. That's how I was raised. I like people. I'm in the hardware store, and this man behind me, he's like my father, like prototype for my father and my grandpa, these men who fix things. And he's humming. And I know me right now, I was like, oh, it's like my dad humming when he's fixing things. I wanted to find a heavy object and bludgeon this man to death. This is this is not me. And I was so ashamed. I'm this hateful person all of a sudden. No, what happens is that you're like, in our California freeway chases, we have the cars with the rims on the freeway. They've shot off the tires. That's what your mental health basically is. You are wired and angry and feel rage at all times, like nothing's even happening. And you have that feeling. And then hot flashes, this is really important. And night sweats, which are their nighttime incarnation, they aren't just uncomfortable, they are harmful. Because with the hot flash, this is like a withdrawal symptom from drugs. You have a release of stress hormones. And when you have that chronically, it's damaging to the body. And so this is why women will wake up, the night sweat, it's like you wet the bed through every pore of your body. It's really awful. And you're not sleeping. So then you wake up this way. You're one of the 5 times I would wake up at night. Many times it would be like this. And I'm a dummy in my sleep. Oh, the duvet's warm. I'm not thinking complex thoughts. I don't remember my dreams. I would wake up feeling like angry. Why? And this is it's chemically induced, or you wake up, this is the worst. You have this clutching fear, for no reason, as if, and it's like the fear you would have if you heard someone break into your house. I mean, this is crazy and horrible. And I tried every manner of voodoo to sleep. And it turned out that what I needed, and I read the research, I don't go to the doctor, I had a hot flash sitting here in my Venice cool office. I felt like I was locked in a trunk in the Florida Everglades. And I realized, oh, I think that was a hot flash. Oh no. And I wanted to go to my doctor, and we should be able to do this, to say, hey, I'm uncomfortable. What should I do? But because I've been coached very generously, informally, by an epidemiologist who's behind reforming statistical significance and methodology, and co-wrote the seminal textbook in his field, Sandra Greenland. And so he has, since around 2007, coached me in how to read and critically evaluate science, and also has sent me all these articles about fraud and errors and abuse in medicine, where they do pointless medical care. They find out it's pointless. I had this myself, where they offered me knee surgery that was just shown to be pointless for wear and tear injuries. And us, we heard, old mofos, not based on your hip is short or anything, that it is pointless to have this for, the kind of knee pain you feel, joint pain. And so from his coaching, that allowed me to be able to critically evaluate the science. And I read deeply. I read for like a week, for starters, and I saw, oh my God, the practice standards for menopause and perimenopause, and the evidence, there's like a Grand Canyon-like gap between them. And I was horrified. And so this is what started this book. And actually, it was that I had to have 3 fights with my medical care provider. So I had 3 battles with my medical care provider, Kaiser Permanente, to get progesterone. This is oral micronized progesterone, FDA approved, very important. Don't use those creams. They do not protect your endometrium or breasts. And the wild, wild west of the internet, you have no idea what you're getting. And even from some of these practitioners, the woo-woo, oh, we're better than those allopathic doctors, yeah, you want tested drugs. As bad as our FDA is, the drug agency, they go to factories and make sure that they're not putting Viagra in your progesterone, et cetera. So they have given 300 milligrams of oral micronized progesterone in France since 1980 safely. And actually, they give huge doses there too, and it can be used safely as anesthesia. Really importantly, unlike benzodiazepines that people take for sleep, which are associated with cognitive damage later in life, progesterone speeds up your breathing while you're sleeping. This is healthy, and so progesterone's been taken there. It's an enormously healthy drug that, for example, goes up to 10 times the amount in a menstrual cycle when you're pregnant. So pregnant women are not dying. But they're tested. This is progesterone's highly tested, so we know it's safe. And I can get into the idea that it's carcinogenic and that about estrogen also, because they're actually not cancer causing themselves. It has to do with whether you have cancer, and then it can run with cancer. So anyway, getting back more on point to the progesterone, Kaiser, my provider, they were giving women on their formulary medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is a synthetic knockoff of progesterone. Now, if you don't read the science and you choose the formulary, like the current head of gynecology, she practices menopausal medicine as if it's 2002, discredited research by 2004. She's still advising based on the discredited research. I had an appointment with her, just terrible. Anyway, so they give this drug, medroxyprogesterone acetate, binds with the wrong receptor in the breast, can increase your breast cancer risk. It is bad for cardiovascular health and brain health. And it doesn't have the effects progesterone does, the global effects to protect your health. And it will stop hot flashes. It's powerful. It's actually more powerful than progesterone. But for all the negative effects, you can just take adequate progesterone and be helped. So I had 3 battles to get the drug, to get the amount I needed, and to get it covered, because my other drugs are covered. And they treated this as if, my wanting to not have breast cancer was some sort of horrible Karl Lagerfeld-like excess. And so, because I'm a naive dummy and a sap from the Midwest, after I showed them all these studies saying, look, see, there isn't risk, and this is actually, the healthy thing to take in perimenopause, and this amount is healthy. And I can get into why that is 300 as opposed to the 100 or 200. This is malpractice in the US that they give for no reason, not because it's tested. It's just what they do. Anyway, I say, will you now give this to all your female patients instead of medroxyprogesterone acetate? Put this on the formulary. And no. Like, what an idiot. And I was so enraged because it was like, for me, it's like watching someone from across the street about to walk into an open manhole and just sitting there and continuing to sip my drink and saying nothing. So I was outraged that all these women who simply are crazy, insane science nerds like I am wouldn't read the research. I mean, they shouldn't have to. And then would be basically, put at risk for cancer and not having their symptoms alleviated. Terrible. So that's what caused me to write this thing that, believe me, I called it the book monster in process. And my joke is that I forgot to take endocrinology when I forgot to go to med school. But that's actually a good thing, because when you go to med school, there's an orthodoxy. Everything looks so legitimate, shiny, legitimate, textbooks, everything. So you tend to think this must be real and true. I don't believe anything. I'm not impressed by anybody. I don't care how famous you are. I will read your research, and I read the physiology. I learn the physiology, and in a deep, like, I'm a naked, ignorant baby kind of way, where from the beginning, these textbooks, and looking things up and asking questions, not just believing in things, because you'll see that sometimes physiology in med textbooks is wrong, and you have to read a few sources, and that's what you're not getting from your doctor. And this is why there's such a betrayal of women, because basically they treat you off a sheet, since they're all baby doctors mostly, or reproductive health specialists, like in treating people with fertility problems and other issues. And so menopause and perimenopause, maybe they had a page in their medical textbook. Maybe they had a day of somebody talking to them a million years ago in med school, but it's not the same as having clinical rotation with some cranky old doctor, who kicks your butt when you get something wrong or diagnose this patient, and you have to, succeed in in the fire of that moment. So this needs to change, but it won't change. And so what I do in Going Menopostal is I bring women the evidence in everyday language, so anybody can understand it. We women, the population of women, we're not stupid. There are people who have, some learning disorders and things. But if you're a generally, intelligent person, like you got through fifth grade English, you can read my book and understand it. And that's really important. The arrogance of presenting things with these medical terms, the high church of medicine, when you can just describe them in ordinary language, so this allows patients three things actually. So to go to their doctor, knowing what the evidence says, so they can make choices according to their values. My book isn't, take hormones. It tells you what the benefits are, the risks are, and you can decide. But then you can go to the doctor and say, the evidence says this, can I have this? And they say, well, no, because doctors practice defensive medicine, which means that doctors will prioritize their fear of being sued over your need to be treated adequately, especially when they are ignorant. It's more so when they're ignorant of what actually is the science in an area, what's the treatment, and so they're practicing, by not giving you the treatment. They don't understand, or maybe they do, that this is also a form of malpractice to deny you symptom relief and protection that actually estrogen and progesterone give you for your bones and brain, your breasts, very, very important. And the rest of your system, estrogen is active in every organ and tissue in our body, and progesterone is ignored but vital. And so this is what should be just standard medical care that every doctor treating women knows.
In terms of the history of this use of synthetic hormones to treat menopause symptoms, I'm guessing that started being experimented with at the same sort of time that the contraceptive pill came on the market. I don't really know how long has this been the treatment course for women in this stage of life?
What happened was the pill was initiated first.
Right.
And the reason they had to use synthetic hormones for that, and also for treating women, was that progesterone was big. It was too big to get into your cells. And so until they micronized it, and that was why France put it out in 1980, micronized progesterone made small enough to be able to get into your cells and have an effect, they just had to treat with these synthetic hormones. But as time went on, I mean, we knew there's a guy named Gusberg. I think was it the 40s? Estrogen, without progesterone, it needs progesterone or it can become cancerous, so because estrogen is proliferative, it isn't cancer causing itself, but it can lead to cell overgrowth that turns into cancer. And so that's why if you have a uterus, you must take progesterone with the estrogen. And it is very, very important, actually, that women hang on to their ovaries and uterus if possible. I just had this, I'm going off on a little tangent. Women get them removed for fibroids, which I show in the book, based on the work of this endocrinologist, Geraldine Pryor, is so illegitimate. Unless you have fibroids pressing on an organ or protruding out your abdomen, and these are rare, you should the fibroids, if they're not, taking over your whole uterus and compromising you in some way, they tend to go away at menopause. So you have them for a few years in perimenopause. I had one, I named it Freddie, because if I laugh at things, it makes them less scary. Freddie the fibroid, he was the size of like a tennis ball, and went away in menopause. So women will get these surgeries. When you have your ovaries and uterus removed, this has terrible long-term health effects, bones, your ability to stay slim, to not have insulin resistance, it's called. Every, part of your health is affected. So it's important to hang on to them and to not have them removed, also because for the utterly illegitimate notion that fibroids cause heavy periods. This is incoherent because most of them are not even in the uterine wall inside. There's only one kind that is. And so they couldn't possibly cause these heavy periods. Again, this is from Geraldine Pryor's work, endocrinologist, University of British Columbia. Fantastic. A fighter for women in science. And so, this is some of the stuff that we see going on where, this is, like these insane things where they're giving this wrong drug. And so because they got used to giving that, and then there's something else. This is so horrible. Doctors and researchers have referred to progesterone and medroxyprogesterone acetate, the synthetic, interchangeably. This is a scientific and medical error, a huge error. And you see famous researchers. This is woman J. Julie Kim, really famous, reputable researcher. And what happens is she says in a paper that basically progesterone causes cancer. Or increases risk. I can't remember. It's more scientific language, say increases risk. So I think this doesn't make any sense, per what I know, because I know progesterone so well. I can draw the molecule and everything. We're BFFs. And so I do what I always do, because I'm a nerd and I'm always worried, am I getting things wrong? I mean, that's a constant backbeat, and it keeps me, I hope, from, being careless, because you can harm women terribly through carelessness that I see that's just endemic in medicine. And so I go to all the references for progesterone being this evil drug. They say MPA, or medroxyprogesterone acetate. I'm horrified. And this has been a thing. One of the guys who he discovered they synthesized progesterone, it was Corner and Allen. I think it was the 30s. Yeah, he wrote a piece in like 1970 saying, please, you got to refer to these properly. Don't use them interchangeably. And you see all these researchers over the years, they do this. They put out these pieces, and they still do it. And with J. Julie Kim, because she's so famous, she's like, I guess, too good to check. And so everyone it's like a game of toxic telephone. They copy from her paper, and this just keeps getting put out there. And even so in America, our FDA, they put out these fact sheets with your drugs. It's so terrible. So the fact sheet with progesterone, this drug that helps you in every way, does not increase your cancer risk like medroxyprogesterone acetate does. In fact, it protects you. That they have the sheet for MPA with your oral micronized progesterone. So you can get this drug that will help you and protect you, and be scared off by the government institution repeating like a parrot the bad science, the false and wrong science of these doctors who are just sloppy. And that's the orthodoxy there. Oh, we're experts, just like we don't have to work too hard. And, it's harming women to a great extent.
The thing that's kind of weird about this, and this applies to other areas of women's medicine, we know that, for instance, treatment of endometriosis or other menstruation-related illnesses is poor as well. I could go on and on about the disappointments of pregnancy, treatment of pregnancy symptoms. So often the attitude is just like, sorry, we can't do anything for you. It's slightly worse even in pregnancy, because you can't even take basic drugs because of the worry about the impact on the baby. So you can't take hay fever relief, you can't take all sorts of painkillers, etc., etc. But anyway, there's all these areas, particularly of women's medicine, where treatment is so poor and there seems to be so little research. And it seems to me as if profit was king, and if all of these pharmaceutical companies had the opportunity to create drugs which would solve illness and discomfort experienced by pretty much all women at some point in their lives, why don't they do it? Like, why isn't there more of just a straightforward capitalist incentive here to address these miseries that women experience?
Well, I think the status quo is what I call suck it up medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And, where it's just women are told in perimenopause or menopause, oh, you're suffering these symptoms. You have the terrible hot flashes. They're told, my favorite bus driver here in LA, was told, oh, you have hot flashes and they're really bothersome. Well, they'll go away eventually. I mean, seriously? We don't tell men that. Like, well, you got the angina? Well, hope you live. It's really terrible. And these symptoms actually can be, accompanied by deadly effects, because you're not being protected. If your breasts are not protected with progesterone, if you just have estrogen, which actually spikes in perimenopause, sometimes 3 times higher levels than in a menstrual period, that makes you sick. That made me sick. And this is why Geraldine Pryor, the endocrinologist, says women should not be given estrogen in perimenopause. Now, some women can take it, but because we can't measure your levels, because estrogen is pulsatile, it pulses every 20 minutes, it changes, maybe more often. So you might be having a spike and we measure it, and that's not your baseline. So that's why it's very frustrating to women. They say, we don't measure you, go by symptoms, in perimenopause. Whereas though in menopause, I had an estrogen test, a baseline test, because I get less than most women of the estrogen I take. So I needed to see, where's my baseline. That's different. And it's probably not extremely, it's probably not the same day to day even, but I needed to have something. And so wait, what was your question? Oh, it was about the,
Why?
sorry, I lost.
That's fine. Why are pharmaceutical companies not more motivated to solve this? Is it something other than the pharmaceutical companies that's causing this failure? Is there some other facet of the medical establishment which is at fault?
Well, frankly, what I don't see often enough in this area of medicine, and I'm really generalizing, is these like nerds, these like crazy impassioned nerds. And endometriosis is an exception. There's an incredible researcher, Linda Griffiths. She started following me on Twitter, and I had all these things to do in the evening. I spent the entire evening like head down in her work. She's incredible. So she's one of those. Geraldine Pryor's one of those. You have to be basically like Joan of Arc of science and really fight to get noticed, to get funding. Often, there isn't funding, especially for these ideas of, oh, well, we already know this. This is a terrible, unscientific type of thinking. And that is, these pregnancy and women's health issues. First of all, pregnancy. Oh, well, women have been pregnant for millions and millions of years. It just happens. Yeah, you suffer. Okay, suck it up. That's suck it up medicine. And then these other areas of women's health, part of the problem is all of these entrenched beliefs that are not scientific. There's an unwillingness and just sort of an inability to ask the right questions. And this is why we see fibroids treated in ways that harm women. They use these morcellators that can cause, if you have cancerous tissue, they can cause it to be dispersed and you can die from that. There's so many just egregious ways of treating women without the investigation, the foundational, the look that I do as somebody who comes to medicine just as, a smart person and needs to know from the bottom up without having any sort of orthodoxy there. And this is the important thing now. I think that my friends do this in the low carb area, Gary Taubes, Nina Teicholz, exposing the unscientific nature of the advice to eat this high carb, low fat diet that we've been given. It wasn't based on any sort of evidence. The people were fraudsters. Fred Stair and what's his name? I think it was Mark Hegstead from Harvard. They were on the take from Big Sugar. So they said, oh no, sugar's healthy and it's the saturated fat that's terrible for you. And in 2020, the American College of Cardiology, after all these decades, finally came out and said, oopsie, sorry, we were wrong. Saturated fat, the evidence suggests it's healthy. You shouldn't avoid it. You can eat, big beefsteaks and chocolate and all sorts of things that we told you not to eat. Well, this compromised Americans' health terribly. It's this belief, belief unchecked. I describe it as having a mind, with like a bed with sheets glued down. There's no, they don't even think to challenge it. Why would they? Accept it. I learned this in med school. So this is really a big part of the problem, that looking at things anew, that just doesn't happen. And those doctors who do this, like Griffiths, I mean, they really need to be supported both financially, and she gets grants and everything, but also we need to spread the word of them, because women will see, look, there's hope. Number one, and then maybe other researchers will follow suit and join her area of research to improve care. Because endometriosis, oh my God, the suffering, it's just so terrible. And women who are these vital, vibrant people who could live their lives and have wonderful work they put out and families and everything that are happy, they spend so much of their time suffering. And that makes you a different sort of person emotionally when you're physically suffering. You can't help it. I mean, I can. I'm a weenie about these things.
This is not the end of the episode. Actually, we're only halfway through, but the rest of the show is behind a paywall. In the extended version of the episode, Amy and I spoke about why women are particularly likely to encounter what Amy calls suck it up medicine, why ethnic differences, as well as sex differences, have been neglected in medicine to the detriment of patients, and the non-pharmacological interventions that can improve the health and well-being of menopausal women. While you can, of course, listen to MMM wherever you get your podcasts, the true home of the show is to be found at louiseperry.substack.com. That's where you can find not only the extended version of this episode, but also the extended versions of hundreds of MMM podcasts, plus the weekly bonus episodes I record with other Substackers and the MMM chat community. This is a listener-supported podcast. I am utterly reliant on paid subscribers to produce the show and keep the lights on. If you find Maiden Mother Matriarch valuable, the most helpful possible thing you can do is to sign up for a paid subscription at louiseperry.substack.com. Thank you.